Okay, so our project presentation is on the economic impact of anticipated versus unanticipated events on businesses, and our example will be Hurricane Florence.
I had the opportunity to do the event information on Hurricane Florence, and some of the things that I saw while I was searching through the information was that the storm made landfall on September 14th, 2018, near Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, and it was a Category 1 hurricane. It killed at least 51 people in North Carolina and South Carolina combined. It's known as the wettest storm to hit North Carolina, and this is due, in fact, to the reasoning of it was projected to dump 9.6 trillion gallons of water on North Carolina alone. It stretched 350 miles wide, making North and South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, and Maryland declare states of emergency. Upon landfall, it contained damaging winds, record rainfall, and many tornadoes. This is seen through the mass amounts of damage that it caused to North Carolina and some parts of South Carolina. And as I had stated earlier, projected to release 9.6 trillion gallons of rainfall, and that is the equivalent of 10 inches of water covering the entire state of North Carolina. And this is a little timeline of Hurricane Florence. September 1st, it was deemed as a tropical storm, and they gave it the name Florence. September 4th, it grew into a Category 2 hurricane with winds of 100 miles per hour. September 10th, it had grown into a Category 4 major hurricane, and this is when the White House approved the declarations of emergency in the states that I had listed. Luckily, it did not make landfall at this point in time. September 14th was when it finally made landfall on Wrightsville Beach. It was a Category 1 hurricane, and it made landfall early morning around 7:15. September 16th, it had been affecting the area for about 2 days, and it pretty much dumped at least 3 feet of rain in some areas affected. September 17th, the floodwaters blocked 1,200 roads in the state of North Carolina. That's an astronomical number. Just imagining, the amount of roads that are in North Carolina. September 18th, Florence was downgraded to a cyclone with winds of 25 miles per hour.
When businesses face a natural disaster such as Hurricane Florence, they'll either anticipate what will happen to their demand or they won't. Typically, during a natural disaster, the demand of a good or service will increase depending on if the customers regard the service as important to their welfare. This is especially relative to gas, food, water, and natural resources such as wood. The goal of a company is to adjust the supply based on the demand to reach a state of equilibrium. If a company anticipates whether or not their services are going to increase or decrease in demand, it allows them time to adjust their production by either increasing it or decreasing it depending on the amount demanded so that they don't have huge profit losses. If a business such as Evian Bottled Water anticipates an increase in demand due to more consumers demanding bottled water in case of water shortages, they will be able to produce more in the coming days before the storm to ensure that they have enough to satisfy the increased demand. On the other hand, restaurants and bars will anticipate a decrease in demand for their services as less people go out for food during the hurricane. They'll decrease the amount of food and drinks they buy as they are expecting less consumers. They may close completely as there is little or no demand from customers as nobody goes out for food. By doing this, it allows them not to waste money on goods that are not being demanded. When a business does not anticipate changes to their aggregate demand during a natural disaster, it does not allow them to make necessary changes in order to be resourceful and not wasteful. Every business during a hurricane will see changes in how much their goods and services are demanded by consumers, And again, the goal of a business is to meet equilibrium and balance demand with supply. For example, there would likely be an increase in canned foods during hurricane as consumers expect potential power outages and demand more foods that can be preserved. A business like Campbell's Soup that does not anticipate an increase in demand will not be able to meet this increase. As consumers suddenly demand more, they may run out of their product as they did not anticipate an increase and therefore did not produce more. On the contrary, if the weather has been reasonably warm before the hurricane, sunglasses companies such as Ray-Ban may have seen increases in the demand of their product and so adjusted to that production. They will then see a huge decrease in demand when the hurricane occurs. If they have not anticipated the change in demand when the hurricane comes to fruition, they will likely be overproducing as no one buys their product. This may result in them having to discount the sunglasses, which generates profit losses for the company.
So in addition to a change in demand, natural disasters and storms can also expect to impact the supply chains in the affected areas, but also on a global scale. So storms such as Hurricane Florence will cause flights to be delayed or canceled, ports will have to close, highways will have to be shut down, and things of that nature will delay or completely stop the transport of goods and materials for businesses. So disruptions of the supply chains can directly impact a business's source of revenue. So they can anticipate these effects and on their supply chains and stay ahead of the curve by monitoring real-time data, which is one of our external factors that they can look at. So businesses can stay on top of things by watching weather reports, watching closures for highways and delays for flights and things of that nature. So they can mitigate by changing a route or coming up with a new plan that will help keep the flow of their supply chains going. In addition to external factors such as weather and lanes of transportation, businesses that are well equipped to mitigate the effects of a storm will also be able to view in full transparency their internal data. So they'll be able to look at things like their inventory and order status and things of that nature so that they can stay aware of what they have moving, what lanes of transportation those are taking, and how much stock the company currently has. Having systems that update instantly will help keep that business ahead of the curve. And the more that they can stay on top of the storm and the more well-equipped they are, the less it will affect their bottom line. Businesses that do not anticipate a storm and remain unprepared, they may have to shut down, or they're really going to struggle when they try to open back up and the supply chains get moving again. Most businesses today run on that lean business model, so they don't keep a lot of inventory. And they bring in items to sell just in time. So because of that, when a storm hits, if they are unprepared, they may run out of stock, and it'll make it a lot harder for them to get restarted once the supply chains reopen, because they're still going to have a time lag from that materials and goods coming in to be sold or produced into sellable goods. Businesses who do not prepare will also be adversely affected should their supply chain management systems be knocked out. This will cut off all communications with their suppliers. They won't know anything about lane closures for transportation and things of that nature if their systems get knocked down. And they won't be able to track their orders, which means that they're going to lose money.
So both businesses who anticipate and who don't anticipate this natural disaster, such as Hurricane Florence, are both going to see an increase in price. The difference between that is when it is seen and what the increase in price is trying to compensate for. So businesses that do anticipate a hurricane like Hurricane Florence, they're going to have higher baseline prices because they're trying to offset the cost of preparations that they installed. These preparations can include backup generators, roll-down shutters, and even water pumps, and these can cost thousands of dollars. After a hurricane has been predicted, the price on anticipating businesses, those will increase to help ration essential supplies and make up for the revenue that's being lost when non-essential items are not being bought. Many non-essential businesses such as JCPenney and Macy's will close down because they know they won't make a profit because no one will be willing to pay for their merchandise. After a hurricane hits, prices will remain higher to help ration the demand of supplies, but also to make up for lost revenue during the time it was closed. After the passing of the emergency, prices will return to normal because the business will not need to compensate too much more for the expensive damages. So businesses who do not anticipate a hurricane will have lower baseline prices to start with because they won't have to cover the expensive preparations and therefore have a lower startup cost. Prices will stay low prior to a hurricane because they don't anticipate the spike in demand. Not raising the prices will result in no supply and the business having missed out on making a profit. When unanticipated businesses do get more supply in, they're likely to price gouge, which I'll talk about later, to make a profit. After a hurricane, some businesses did not open back up for weeks and even months due to the damage that was caused. When they did open back up, these unanticipated businesses, their prices remained really high because they had to pay up for the expense of repairing the damage and also the loss in revenue while it was closed after the hurricane. So lastly is price gouging, and it has to do when businesses run out of supply or supplies in really high demand. It's when they charge too much for essential items, like Charlotte said, talking about canned food, water, gas, and even natural resources like wood. 36 states have a law against price gouging. Many of these states, it's only for during natural disasters and states of emergency. During Hurricane Florence, there were 500 incidents of price gouging alone in North Carolina. When businesses are caught price gouging, there can be a fine as up to $200 or $2,500 per item that was sold.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna compare some of the businesses that did prepare versus what happened when they didn't. And JCPenney, by preparing, they closed 7 of their locations, 4 of which were in South Carolina, the other 3 being in North Carolina. Smithfield Foods shut 2 pork plants, which caused a 2.6% decrease in the prices. Boeing closed 787 plants in South Carolina, but only resumed once it was safe to do so. Cypher halted work at hospitals. Nucor suspended operations at 2 different steel plants. Daimler shut down their just opened van factory. The Volvo car group idled their first U.S. factory in South Carolina. Cargill idled their meat plants once the ports closed, and Gildan closed their distribution center. These decisions were made by these businesses to help encourage the workers to stay safe and seek shelter and keep their families safe as well. The storm closed more than 1,000 roads, and it cut the power of more than 1 million people as it spawned destructive tornadoes. Dozens of the customers were on high alert status, and others were begging for resources. A lot of these places that were not prepared had to borrow up to $2 million from the U.S. Small Business Administration. They had to replace or repair their damaged machinery, property, or whatever to help cover their operational losses. $44 billion total damage. A lot of these places lost economic output and they had to seek loans to help recover. And 57% of small businesses have no disaster recovery plan. And this right here just impacted the ones that were not prepared because it seemed to have damaged them the worst and had them to take out bigger loans. And this would cause companies to be in really bad debt. At least the ones that prepared had a little bit more of an insurance plan.